Welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. For those of you that are brand new to Event Marketing Redefined, for those of you that are past attendees, appreciate having you here. We're going to give you the best hour we can give you on this topic today and talking about events. Pablo really needs no introduction. Pablo, for me, helps run this podcast, produce this podcast, helps me ideate this podcast, and his team executes this podcast along with mine. But Pablo, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, tell people who you are.
Yeah, Pablo Gonzalez. I founded a company called Be the Stage. Been on this thesis of community creation for business development that has really played out nicely in the last 9 years. I've been chasing it. I think the podcast is one tool. Events are another tool. I think about this stuff of how to drive connection between people all the time. It's all I care about, and making really cool swag that Matt doesn't like.
So what we're talking about today is what people want from events now and how to do it. And I think where we're going to start, Pablo, I don't know, if you want to correct me, is essentially going back to what events were and some of the changes, right?
Yeah, man. I just remember in our first conversation out back at Jerry's event was very much about this idea with you that events are changing,
Yeah.
and you immediately had some hot takes about it, man. So I think you starting off with why you say that the value prop of events have changed would be a really good start of this conversation.
Yeah. So, all right. So I've been saying this for a while now. I think events, and I do think specifically the last 2-3 years coming out of COVID, they have changed a ton. And I think they will continue to push in this direction. But I'll give a bit of an outline of what I think. I think back in the 90s, early 2000s, even up until about 2014, 15, I think this is what the old value of, say, an event or a third-party conference in particular is. It's the convenience of congregation. It is bringing everybody together in an industry, in an association with people that had sort of mutual interests, right? There was convenience that there's a third-party organizer. There's a person doing it for you, okay? People would go value-wise. They want to prospect. They want to network. They want to listen to keynotes. They want to learn. And of course, like everybody always says, they want to see what's new. I call a ton of bullshit on that, but essentially I do think that there is an element to that, particularly back in the day, particularly when we're talking old value. So I think that is what drove people to events. That is why they went. They typically met people that they were not able to meet. They met prospects they couldn't meet. They met partners they didn't know existed. And it really was the grip that events had on people. It is the reason why companies spent exhibitor dollars, sponsorship dollars, attendees spent dollars to go without really thinking why, because it was like a thing to do, and there really was an alternative in that sense. So to me, that's kind of the outlay of like what the old value of an event and third-party conference was.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but I think that's like almost the eternal value. Most of that stuff is like the eternal value of events. Back then, there was also the idea that, as the event organizer, what the value you brought to market was the list of the people, right? It was the list of like everybody that has this job title. And as all of us who are obviously on LinkedIn these days, we know that we can now create a list of exactly that job title right now, right? Mm-hmm. I know, at least for me, man, I started realizing the change in this stuff that we're going to talk about. I want you to expand on the listing and I want you to expand on the other stuff. But in early 2019, as I left my old job in 2018 and was trying to figure out, do I start a company? Do I go get a job? My response was to take like a 90-day purposeful pause and figure out where I want to be in 10 years. And what I wanted to do in those 90 days was like get as much information and reps talking about the stuff that I'm thinking about as I could. So I went to like 5 conferences in 90 days. And I remember that when I was making my decision-making criteria of where I wanted to be, it was like, who's the type of person that's going to be there and who are the keynotes? And I realized very quickly from the first conference to the second conference, my attendance of the actual keynotes and the stuff on stage went down dramatically. And then from the second one to the third one, my attendance on that went down even more, until by the third one, I was basically just like, I caught like maybe one talk, and the rest of the time I was in the hallway. And that's when I started really realizing that the value of this stuff, the value that I took from that period of my life, was the 1,000 iterations of talking to people that think like me and are business owners and blah, 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 of like what's working for them, what's not, where's the gap, how can I fill it, and where can I move forward, right? So like, I don't know. I thought that was like early 2019, but then
That's
COVID
kind of
really accelerated everything.
That's kind of the unwritten magic of events, right? Like people always talk about like the value of events and why they're so great. And it's difficult to express sometimes
Yeah.
It is those interactions. It is those happy hours, those breakfasts, those off the cuff hallway conversations, the things that happen. I think looking at it now, describing a little bit of the change that's happened. Like,
Yeah.
what is the change that has happened to me? The biggest change that has happened, and if people ignore this, like, they're absolutely like just effing crazy. It is the sophistication and the development of the internet. Yes, we had the internet in 14, 13, 12, 11. But I'll just rattle off a couple tools here. LinkedIn, Facebook, Zoom Info, Seamless AI, Teams, Slack, Reddit, Zoom, Apollo AI. These things were not what they are now in 2014. They weren't even close. They weren't even close. So as I list off those things, what do those things change? They change prospecting for brands. They change research for buyers. They change communication, and they change the ability to get together. That's what those things do. That directly affects in-person live events, whether we like to admit it or not. A lot of event people don't let, oh, face-to-face it's different. It is different. But you cannot ignore the fact of what the sophistication of the internet has done to pull away values that were held at an event. Like back in the day, people were excited to go to the event. They were going to meet new prospects. By the way, if you're in a niche or a decent sized industry and you meet somebody randomly out of the blue from a company that you've never heard of before, your account-based team is not doing their job. They should already be finding them. They should already be in your marketing. They should already be in your prospecting. You should already have eyeballs on them. You think they're just going to randomly walk up to your booth now? They're not, right? They're not. That's not the way it works. The second piece of this is all of these things have an enabled community. COVID enabled community, and community on the side of numerous parts. One is networking, two is research, and three is trust factor inside these communities, right? And I think Facebook, Reddit, Slack, all these channels are giving community a bigger chance. Zoom, right? Zoom happy hours during COVID. People are like, oh, wow, we can meaningfully connect to a degree virtually like we are right now. And I can get peer-to-peer interaction. I can have these questions answered. Last piece I thought about on this was, well, there's two and change, is keynotes in learning. All the keynotes that you go see, let me tell you something. I just reviewed 12 keynote speakers for a conference and looking at them, trying to help select and have my input on 2 of them. I literally, between YouTube, TED Talks, masterclass, podcasts, every video, every audio, anything clip I need on this person, I can watch and see. So keynotes are becoming less important because they can get it at home. They can watch the same keynote at home, essentially. So what these kind of then beg the question, I think, for the spenders of the group, which is typically the hosts, the sponsors, the exhibitors, is why are we spending all this money now when we're already spending money on subscriptions and prospecting and Slack and Zoom channels and everything that they're doing? And I think that is the fundamental change that has happened. Now, with that said, Pablo, it's like, I'm not saying that events have less value. That is not what I'm saying. I think their value is as strong as ever, but the value has changed without a doubt. And the old playbook, I think, will slowly die out. And for those still running it, I think you're behind the 8 ball.
Yep. Couldn't agree with you more, man. You were going down the path of kind of like that person to person and the prospect and the research on people. You know, to me, that is really that whole why the younger millennial Gen Zs are just like, events are too expensive, right? Like, because they're so used to doing that stuff.
You're like, oh, we spent $200,000 to be here?
Yeah.
And
correct.
they're confused naturally. It makes total sense.
Yeah. 100%. And then I thought you weren't going to hit it and I was going to get to sound smart, but like, how do I get better at my job? That stuff is already handled by YouTube. It's already handled by TikTok. It's already handled by podcasts. I'm a product of that myself.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, this idea of the hallway conference, what is the magic of, I think it's what you call peer-to-peer tacit knowledge exchange, right? Like this, what's working for you right now? What do you know that I don't know that isn't out there? How do I contextualize from like the YouTube video into like, okay, good idea. Is it for me? And how do I apply it myself by talking to somebody that's done it? That is truly the thing that really, really tough to put at scale on the internet. And man, the
Yeah.
professional network, right? Like who's the next person that's going to hire me? Like if I'm trapped in my career, what's the next step I make? If I'm stuck trying to solve a problem, who do I call
Yep.
that I can really access when I'm
If
not?
I'm researching a software, a problem to solve, and I want to know what it's really like,
Yeah.
who are they going to go to? It used to be 10, 15 years ago, not easy to just find somebody that's doing the same job for a similar company as you are that's already been there and done that. But now it's easier than ever. So you can just ask. You don't need a BS referral from a company, to give you their 3 happiest customers, one of which is probably their cousin, right? To tell you how great it is. You
Yeah.
can just go figure it out for yourself. It's very easy.
Yeah. So Matt, so that is, I feel like what we just said is the stuff that you can get on the internet, right? Like hey, things have changed. It's not as valuable to me right now. Before we started really the official podcast, we were starting in this conversation of like, super easy to complain about this, super easy to call this thing out. It's a little harder to give some guidance on what is the right way to do it today based on these aha moments and not just like the way we've always done it. So I'd like to take this level by level and start with, okay, trade shows and expos and whatever, what can they do better? People that are attending trade shows and expos and whatnot, what can they like do better to leverage this stuff? And then we can really talk about the elephant in the room of like the owned event and where that value is for companies and how to do that, man. You want to go down that path?
Yeah, so I'll start with what I believe the new value is, because I think that's what drives what people should be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you look at association or industry data from companies like CEIR and different publications that are basically surveying attendees and surveying events, right? And then on top of just my communication, me being on this podcast, talking to people, I feel like this new value is simple, right? One of which is peer-to-peer. Networking, interaction, knowledge share. People want to be around other people solving the same problems they are, or dealing with the same problems that they're dealing with. They don't want to hear it from somebody else. They want to hear it from someone that's in the trench, has been there, has done it, is doing it, has maybe lived through it. So it's not being talked at, it's talking with now is a big difference. The second thing I have here is experience. People want an experience. If you're making me leave my house and leave my ecosystem and leave my work from home and my schedule and the busy thing, don't deliver me something that I can do at home, right? Deliver me something that I cannot do at home. Give me an experience. I think people are genuinely seeking experiences when they go to an event. Community and belonging kind of go together for me. I think they're one and the same. It's not always a community, but I do think people feel like they belong when they go to events, right? To the same crowd, same style people. You're talking peer to peer. When I'm in a group of CEOs that are running small businesses under the size of $100 million or whatever it is, I feel like I belong. There's a feeling to it. I don't know how to describe it. So I think people are craving community and belonging. I think people want to do workshops. This goes back to peer-to-peer. They want to workshop. They want to not physically work like they're working on a dirt bike or something, but I'm saying they want to do stuff together. They want to engage and think and talk and work through things. The last 2 I have on my list is meaningful interaction, right? The days of just throwing a networking event and have it be a happy hour with some food, like that's not really meaningful interaction. If you're just herding people into a room and saying this is a networking event, well, I don't really know how meaningful it is, because I've seen people roll into those and go and grab a drink and stand off to the side and talk to 1 or 2 people. It's not creating what I would consider meaningful interaction. The next piece I have here is, professional development, certifications, right? People want these certifications. They want to develop and progress their career. So I think when you put these together, this is what the new value is. This is what attendees are seeking. This is why people are leaving the home. This is why people are going to an event.
I think that's a really good list, man. Talking with, not being talked to. Experiences, community, meaningful interaction, workshops, right? Like going through something together, right? Like that's kind of like somewhere between meaningful interaction and experience. Echoes what Francisco's saying in the chat. What I keep hearing from conference attendees on why do you still come to this thing is, for me, it's a chance to meet with people I like, people I only see in person once a year, AKA community and sense of belonging. Yet conference organizers don't seem to fully get this, and the formats have really changed. This hurts companies like mine who want and are betting on events as a driver for pipeline and new business opportunities. So,
Okay, so I think that's a really interesting point that we can touch on here, right?
yep.
So if you're talking, let's use a third-party conference as an example, right? So now let's go to the exhibitor, the sponsor side, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So literally at a high level, most people are exhibiting, sponsoring, spending money, going to these events on that side of things for two things. They're going there for pipeline, so sales, right? Leads, sales, pipeline, you call it what you want, right? And they're going there for brand awareness. Okay, got it. So now to what Francisco's describing is essentially saying that now you have the association that's running this event. And if they're running an old playbook, which is the old way of doing things, and essentially basically means that they're not orchestrating the things that I just listed, peer-to-peer experience, community, workshops, meaningful interaction, you as the association have to orchestrate those things. You have to do your best to orchestrate, right? So my advice though, to exhibitors, to sponsors is pretty simple. It's you have to deliver this to your attendees, to your customers, to your prospects. This is the playbook, right? So people are going there. Like I wrote a post about this the other day on LinkedIn. I said, no one's there to buy your shit. People are not rolling into the convention center hall like, I can't wait to buy this software system. That's not how it works. They're not there to buy from you. So what do you have to do? It's a bit of a longer cycle, right? How can you help orchestrate, some peer-to-peer networking, some interaction, some knowledge share? Can you do it in your booth? We did it in a podcast, right? We brought in people to have conversations. We held panel discussions. That's what they want. You have to give the people what they want, right? Experience, deliver an experience. Don't just set up a demo stand and pitch your product. Have a theme, deliver an experience, take them through something, tell a story, make it interesting, make it intriguing, stand out, right? Community and belonging. What community and what sense of belonging does your customer want? If you don't know that, if you don't know who they are, how can you really deliver this, right? Mm-hmm. Workshops, how can you orchestrate things like that? And I think what it all comes down to is that is the meaningful interaction. When you use that as a playbook, now you're getting meaningful interaction with your customer, with your prospect. Whereas the old playbook is that you think the meaningful interaction is just coming because everybody's there and that they're forced into the trade show hall or that they have to roll into a keynote. You have to create the meaningful interaction, and meaningful interaction for your customer is not what you want. It's what they want. That's what I do.
Man, what I'm hearing in what you're saying, Matt, that I hadn't really totally thought through until right now. Right now, when Francisco put that in there, right now with your response, is the idea that as entrepreneurs, we understand that when there's a gap, there's an opportunity to be filled.
Yep.
And it feels like we're almost at the sweet spot right now where events have come back and people all want to go to them and they're still doing it the old way. And while eventually event organizers are going to switch around and start, really giving people what they want as the organizer.
There's some already doing it.
Some are already doing it. But for right now, in your industry, there's a high probability that it's an event doing it the old way. It's people showing up to what Francisco said, saying, damn, man, why did I leave home for this? And you as an exhibitor, you as the person that's there activating in the event, have this unique opportunity to show up with I got you. Here's what you wanted. I can give it to you. And it creates this like moment in time where I think the greatest opportunities happen during context shifts because there is this arbitrage of who's doing it the way that it's demanded versus the way that it used to be demanded.
Yeah.
So I find that to be really exciting, man. And when you talk about it, it makes me think of the kind of like our journey through Exhibitor Live and how we showed up like serving the old way with some new advice, with some like new techniques, AKA showing up exhibiting. Was it like a 20 by 20? What size was the booth?
10 by 30.
10 by 30 with great theme, people stopping and asking, the podcast as an engagement technique and a follow-up and whatever. They worked really well. But the next year we showed up and we went all in on this stuff and instead showed up as, hey, we're doing an event the night prior so people can get together and run our podcast there. Then we're teaching a class the following time. Then we're doing a karaoke night, right? Like I feel like that's almost the exciting part of this conversation is that in this in between, there is that massive opportunity.
Yeah. So one note I made here as we were kind of talking about this is one of the stats I've seen that I think is pretty glaring that people need to pay attention to. And this is for third-party conferences, but also for host events, because host events have exhibitors and sponsors just on a smaller scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
But from all the data that I have seen, there is a 1/3 exhibitor turnover year over year. That's a lot.
A lot.
And I think it has a lot to do with people not, as exhibitors, spending money, not seeing the value that they're receiving from the show. But then the question I would ask in return is, well, is the attendee getting the value? Are you there for two totally different reasons?
Mm-hmm.
How is that ecosystem being married up? So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg. And I think it's a little bit of the reason why a lot of companies are going to throwing their own host events versus relying on association and third-party events.
True.
But I would urge people, if you're exhibiting at large third-party conferences, you have to change up your approach. You have to give people what they want. If you think they're just going to wander to your booth and be curious about you and what you do, and that they're just exploring new tools and resources and products and services, they're not. They're not. They're not there to get pitched. They're not there for that. But what they are there for, they are a little curious. They're looking for experience. They're looking for interaction. So how can you orchestrate that yourself? And I think you can do that in the booth, and I think you can do that out of the booth.
100%. 100%. So let's touch on this, man. I think we've talked about it pretty well. I like that we went straight into the exhibitor kind of like how you act, right? Let's talk real quick on, because this takes me back to that post that I sent you today from LinkedIn where somebody was saying, hey, this is happening. The attendee is going to get theirs, right? Like they're going to find community and find their people, whether they're in the space that's giving them their thing. But then the people that are really footing the bill, that are like paying the bills for the event organizer, who are the exhibitors, if they're not getting theirs, that's why this like 1/3 turnover happens.
Yeah.
That becomes an existential risk because then, like, then you can't throw a better event, blah, 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 loop of doom, right? So let's start with, if you are a third-party event organizer, what are the things that they can be doing, that they should be doing?
I mean, look, I think if you're a third-party event organizer, you have two customers, right? You have attendees, who's attending, who's a part of the association, or if it's not an association or it is, but it's just a yearly event, right? Like who is showing up to your conference? Who is buying a ticket to your conference? Who is coming to be there? And then the other is the exhibitors and the sponsors, and they have two very different agendas, right? The exhibitors and the sponsors want to sell stuff and get connected with the attendees, and the attendees are there for exactly what I listed off: peer-to-peer networking, interaction, knowledge share, and an experience, community, belonging, workshops, meaningful interaction, professional development. So then you have to take the side of what the exhibitors want, which is they want to drive pipeline, they want to meet new customers, talk to current customers, they want to engage with prospects and people face to face. Okay, so there's your board, and you got two circles, and that's the left and the right. And now the inner circle is how you start to do that as an association, right? And I think some of the old stuff has to be thrown out. And I think you need to be starting to put in new stuff in there. Sponsorship packages could definitely be one of them, right? The number of keynotes is something I would completely drop down. I think I would be giving exhibitors and sponsors opportunities to run think tanks. I would be giving them opportunities to listen, talk, and engage with their customer, but it has to be good for the customer. So I think those are like some clear-cut areas that I would be making adjustments there. But I think understanding that it's an ecosystem, you have to know what party one wants, you have to know what party two wants, and you have to find creative ways for meshing that together, because there's just no getting around it. The events require both.
Yeah, I like that, man. My head goes to kind of like the fine balance between that is finding, kind of like at Exhibitor Live, right? Like putting you to teach the class on how to do the podcast as a trade show booth, something that we as practitioners executed, that is something that our clients can also execute. To me is a really fine, it's like walking that fine line, right? Like
that's a good example. Exhibitor Live does a really good job of that with their classes. They let people like myself teach them, but they vet the class. They take a survey result. They basically surveyed and reviewed our entire class to make sure that our entire class was not a pitch to work with Rockway Exhibits and Events. Because that's what other events don't do. They give sponsors and people, oh, hey, here's the stage. Oh, teach this class. Oh, run this session. It's total bullshit. It's an absolute pitch. The entire thing is a pitch. The value is not there. So when you go to a workshop or you go to a class and the class is on point, but it's taught by me, we're both getting what we want. The attendee is getting knowledge that they didn't have. They're getting something thought-provoking. They're growing themselves professionally. They're opening their mind up to things maybe they didn't know or didn't know worked and existed, versus I'm getting face to face with potential prospects and customers that now get to see who Matt is, what Matt believes, and what my company, what message we're trying to convey that brings value to them.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So really, that's a good example of a good ecosystem that I think a lot of associations screw up because they give really big companies bullshit stages, and basically they just pitch their product. Like, I mean, the names of some of these classes are unbelievable. It's just a product pitch. I mean, you walk in there, you're like, I've learned nothing other than about this product. And then you have people disengage, they're on their phones, people walk out of the class, the attendance is low, people skip out and go to the bar. And then what you end up happening is like, why are we even doing this? Why are we all here? Why are we all spending all this time, energy, and money and being in this room? Makes no sense.
And I think the magic sauce behind that, that is kind of like the wizard behind the curtain, is number one, you mentioned it, the heavy vetting of who's going to teach the class, right? Like Exhibitor Live made us jump through hoops, man. You know, like the application process, multiple trainings,
job,
right?
yeah.
Like it was on like Donkey Kong. Like we could not just like fake the funk on that one. And second is, which I don't think we've touched on, is they offer a real certification that has proven to help people get better jobs and be better at their job, right? So if you wrap it, if you don't just like, you're not just offering sponsors to come and talk, or even, we weren't even sponsoring, right? We were just like coming and talking and supporting the conference. But like, if you make a sponsorship package where it's like, all right, you come up with something great to teach that is part of a greater curriculum.
Yeah.
Now you've got like a 3-prong win, right? Like the association wins because it's promoting the industry and putting out a brand there. The student, the attendee, wins because it is that badge on their resume, helps them make more money and have a better career. And the exhibitor and, or, you know, like the client that would be the exhibitor wins because they get to be in front of a crowd as an expert. And that really, really works, man.
If I'm going to be a sponsor at an event, right, and I'm going to pay, don't make me pay 20 grand to sponsor a lunch where you put my logo on the napkins and I get to say 5 things at the beginning of the lunch.
Yeah.
Let me run the lunch. Give me control of the lunch. Let me bring in a chef and do a cooking thing. Let me give an experience. And like, that is where areas of this stuff needs to be rethought. Is you know, again, it goes back to me. We're face to face. That is the age old. People are like, oh, in person's different. It is different. In person is definitely different. Like everybody that's on this call right now, if we were all in a hotel ballroom together, it would be different than where we are right now. Right. But this serves a good purpose for what we're doing here for 60 minutes. So my thought is that when you are face to face, don't waste it. Right. Get the meaningful interaction. Make sure it's good for both sides. And I think that's a big change that has to happen. And I'm sure, you know, John mentioned here, if associations measure the success of their events primarily on generation of non-dues revenue, there is a risk of losing sight of their mission to serve their community, right? So there are things at play here, the way associations are run, right? I mean, there are associations, I hate to break it to everybody, there are associations that 95% of their revenue comes from the single event that you attend. They're not really a business. I hate to break it to everybody. They're not really a business. Like the business comes from you paying to be at the event. They're a congregator, right? And then they do some other things. What other mission, you know, like John's mentioning, if they have missions and things that they're pushing and they're driving. So there's a lot at play here when it comes into these events. But overall, I think where we're driving is that these events, they do have to change because I think they will be disrupted at some point. And they are already starting to be disrupted. I think a key one that I've seen over and over, we can go into some details on them, is where companies do not exhibit or attend, but they leverage the fact that a large conference is going on in a city and they run guerrilla marketing and offsite plays in the city. That's something that is happening more and more and more and more.
100%, man. I think that answers what Francisco said. The day I don't get offered only a gold, silver, bronze sponsor package with 75% flush BS garbage inclusions, I'll be happy. Yep. That's kind of like that whole, like, don't make me sponsor a lunch to just like have my logo on there and say 4 words. What John is saying, this is if associations measure success of their events primarily on generation of non-dues revenue, there's a risk of losing sight. I think that idea of like making it a certification, now that's mission, right? Like you're really doing that. The last thing I would like to hit on third-party events is something that you've told me before that you haven't said in a while, is that you see the third-party events turning into more like South by Southwest and more like Art Basel than like hymns or whatever other big event. What do you mean by that?
Well, okay. So I just think like if you've seen events that have taken off that have the demand, right? They have more festivalization to them. They are more experiential. They have other things going on in their format versus just a typical B2B conference style event. They're just a little more bland. They're just a little more vanilla, right? These festivalations have different elements to them. I think it turns me back into thinking like what we talked about earlier. You have two parties at a third party conference or really a host. The host events are not that different. You know what I mean? They're really not that different. But essentially, it's like, okay, there is an ecosystem of business going on at an event. And if everybody just settles themselves with that, that's great, right? Someone's making money somewhere. People are developing relationships and clients and prospects and all that. But it goes back to how do you deliver these things that people are seeking? Because people thought it used to deliver, it no longer delivers.
Mhm.
Or it's that those deliverables are being done elsewhere,
Yeah.
right? Like my team at Rockway is not waiting for Exhibitor Live to get in front of a prospect. We're not waiting for it. We might see them as a part of the journey there,
Mhm.
but we're not waiting to meet them there. You know what I mean? It's just different. Whereas in the past, you would go there being like, oh, look, let's see who the new event manager is at X, right? And it's just not like that anymore.
Yeah.
That
True.
person needs to be delivered an experience. They need to get to know who we are. We need to stand out. We need to be different. They need to remember our messaging. And the way you're going to do that is by delivering an experience, getting them to your offsite event, having them in your booth, doing something memorable,
Yep.
giving them the ability to third party interact, peer to peer engagement, put them through a workshop, think tank, host panel discussions. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think it is a real opportunity for third party event organizers, right? Like what we just said of South by Southwest and whatever. I mean, Salesforce is that, Inbound is that, right?
Yep.
Like it's become that. In Miami, there's a conference called Emerge Americas that has now become Miami Tech Week. And it's a whole week. And what I'm hearing is essentially like activate the creatives in the community, activate the culinary part of the community, like create these experiences outside of it, make it a whole thing so people can like, it becomes like a festival, like you're
Yeah.
saying. And I think that that's ripe for the third party organizer. I think it can happen as like obviously it's happened as a owned event organizer because we're talking about HubSpot and Salesforce doing it.
Yeah.
But when you're a third party organizer, you're an event company. This is what you do. This is what you breathe. It's a lot harder for Rockway to like do that than like somebody that really does
Yeah.
that year round, especially if your revenue is like a one thing a year, right? Like,
Yeah.
so you teased it a little bit. We're not waiting around. Rockway is not waiting around to go meet their clients. The genesis of this show started off with me being like, hey, Matt, I'll just say which shows, right? I'm seeing Winter put on this show called Spring that is essentially 2 days at a brewery and having great reviews. I'm seeing Audience Plus put on Golden Hour, which is essentially one day in a New York rooftop, super steroid content creation, co-creation experience, and having some success. I had just bought my own ticket for what's called the Arcadia Leadership Experience. Basically, they're a partnering consultancy and they're putting on it's like 3 days of glamping in Bozeman in July, all outdoors,
Yeah.
all kind of like what we're talking about peer to peer. And we ourselves are working on the event marketing congress that we're putting on here in July with
Yep.
global event directors. So I really wanted to just kind of like break down these things that we like and don't like, and the way that you are just like, no, my event's going to be like this.
Yep.
So why don't we start with like what you like and what you don't like out of the events that you've seen that we're kind of mentioning? Oh, also Adam Robinson's event where he rented out like some villa and it
Yeah.
went viral. Yeah,
So what I like and what I don't like, you want to start
yeah,
with? Okay.
yeah.
So what I do like is I like people taking a swing at trying stuff differently because I think the instinct and the sort of qualitative information that they're making these assumptions to run these different kind of events is a good thing. They're reacting to what's around them. They're reacting to going to conferences and events and thinking like, this isn't that good, right? Like this could be better. And I think that's what you're getting with Audience Plus running Golden Hour. Who was the other one you mentioned?
Spring by Winter
Winter.
by Peplage.
Yeah, I appreciate that piece about it, right? I think we have to be careful when we are venturing in these different directions because events have lasted, your traditional B2B conferences, they've made it this far, right? So there's something there. There's something in them. There is something to it about congregating people together, the format in which they get together. So I don't think events need to be flipped on their head. I think they just need to be adjusted and tweaked like anything else.
Yeah.
So it's making sure that you take kind of the good with the bad, because there's a mix that works. There are things that have been working at events, and getting people together with some form of format does work. Like I think you and I talked about golden hour, and the over focus on content really pulled them down.
That's what I heard, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had basically said themselves that they had made that mistake, and here's why. So,
Yeah.
You're seeing people learn, but I think what it always comes down to is, what do the people want that are coming to this event? Why are they attending your event, right? What are they attending for? And you have to get creative in delivering that to them. So it shouldn't be about what you want. It should be about what they want, and then trying to curate a format that works and getting creative so that it works.
100%. So I'll tell you what I like about each of those 3 events that I mentioned a little while ago. For spring, it got on my radar when I saw that my buddy John Ruggi was going 2nd year in a row, hosting a panel on category design 2nd year in a row, right? Like the idea that they found the guy under the radar that has real expertise to talk about the subject that everybody's talking about, but only ever invites one person to it to talk about it. I thought that was really, really good, right? Like, they was really going into topics of like, what's category design versus strategic narrative, and having him host an open thing. I also like that Chris Walker, our boy Chris Walker, right? Like, he's become a celebrity. When he was there, he was just one person in the crowd. The interaction, the small, one place, one brewery, the person who's the biggest keynote there is also an attendee all day long, and you get to like talk to them, and isn't just like flown in and flown out of a back door. I think that that's really good.
And I think the other thing I would ask on that with the keynote is, what has that keynote speaker done? Yeah. Who are they? Because what I'm finding from searching a lot of keynotes and people nowadays, they haven't done much.
Yeah. They're like reporters.
Other than talk. They haven't done much other than talk, do photo shoots, and do video work, and explaining something that they've never executed themselves. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I tell you this all the time. One of the best keynotes I ever listened to was Bill Rancic. Look up Bill Rancic. Bill Rancic has done a lot. So when he spoke to CEOs and people running businesses and building businesses and trying to build generational wealth and businesses that serve a purpose and have value, I can tell you right now, as one of those people, it completely resonated. It hit with me. Yeah. Versus I've been in other keynotes where I kind of want to raise my hand and be like, hey, when did you do this? When did you execute this? Because I think it's real easy to spit bullshit out there. Sorry, I'm going on a rant about keynotes. We're off.
I want to be there when you do that, for the record. As the practical optimist that you are, I want to be in a room where you raise your hand and you like tell the keynote speaker, excuse me, have you ever done anything? But yeah, like, if I was to summarize that, I would say practitioners, not reporters or researchers telling you how to do things. Right?
Those people that can come in, it's a different feel when they can relay things they've been through, things that they've worked on, and that they've had it. Look, having skin in the game of getting it executed is everything. Yep. Having the skin in the game to get something executed is everything. Just telling somebody to go do A, B, and C, and it will do this, different.
I want to talk about the skin in the game of you executing on this, just to finish off on the other 2 events. What I like, Audience Plus, Golden Hour, I thought what they did really well is tie their sponsorship packages to a content creation piece that came with it, right? Like, they created, like, the sponsors were able to like do this thing, right? Like, maybe the answer wasn't one camera for every 10 attendee and make you feel like you're in the real world, but this idea of like creating a experiential content marketing, to me, that's 100% right. I thought they did that well. And then this Bozeman thing, man, I was just like, fuck, dude, I'd want to go to this, whether if not it was a conference or not. Yeah. Like, if you can create an activity around something that's just cool, and on top of that, you're going to bring an ecosystem together at it, to me, that seems like a real home run. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I got to write off glamping in Montana in the summer, about it. So I'm taking a shot at that. Let's talk about Event Marketing Congress, Matt. So like, give like the quick rundown of the, like what you were trying to accomplish, the agenda, and recent feedback that you've gotten.
Yeah. So I think for me, I think it's us trying to put our money where our mouth is, to a degree, and like eating our own dog food, I guess you would say. So kind of like the insight has been from doing the podcast, talking to our customers, talking to our potential, people who would be prospects, our customer profile, right? Director of events, head of global events, senior field marketing manager, all the people that are running, event managers, senior event manager, you name it. We've talked to them. And one of the sentiments that has come across is, there's Exhibitor Live, there's SEMA, there's EMS, I could go on forever with these event marketing things, but they have basically turned into a pitch fest to a large degree. And I think what I heard, and you heard that we discussed a ton, is what our customer is seeking. It goes back to what I said earlier. What does your customer want? And ours wants the ability to communicate, network, workshop, think tank, and soak each other in peer to peer. They want the ability. They're looking for mentorship. They're looking for peer to peer communication. For example, in my industry, I have on my hand, not mentors, other CEOs, COOs, executives in my industry that are with competitors that I can call at any point in time. Then I have mentors that are in the industry, right? Like my mentor is Dave Wallens from Exploring Incorporated. Like Dave's older than me. He's been in the industry for 40 years, right? He has a business way, way bigger than mine. So it's like our customers want those things. They want the ability to call another head of global events and be like, hey, what do you think about that? Like they're looking for that. They're looking to work together. They're looking to workshop. What are you struggling with? How are you dealing with it? How are you getting creative? How are you managing your people? Blah, 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 right? Like that's what we heard. So we said, why not be the ones that bring it to them? Why not be the person that brings it to them and delivers them a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, whatever you want to call it, experience that allows them to do that together. Now, yes, some of our event is orchestrated. It's obviously, we're not just throwing people in a room and letting them kind of like talk. We're orchestrating it, but we don't really have keynotes. We have 2 outside speakers who are each talking for like 30, 45 minutes.
And I fought you tooth and nail
you fought me on the second. They're workshops though. They're not keynotes. They are workshops. They are being structured as workshops. Both of the people coming in know that they're being structured this way, and the audience knows. It will be interactive. People are coming with questions. We're going to work through things. It's not just me talking at you for 60 minutes, hopping off the stage, standing off to the side, and then having a line of people come over to tell you how great you are for 40 minutes, and then you leave, right? Like it's totally different. They will be at the event for 2 days with everybody, interacting, engaging, and communicating. So I think for me, we believe in this. Look, if I want meaningful interaction with potential prospects and we have customers that are coming, that are already customers. I have to give them what they want and be a part of it. So why not build it? Why not create it?
I'll tell you what I love about it, man. Number one is you said, hey, you want to call it a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. You thought really long and hard about my customers' downtime is the middle of summer. Most events happen fall, spring.
Q1.
We've got to do something that's like when they're not super busy. And if we make it Sunday night through Tuesday afternoonish, that is the least amount of time that they can take off of work and be away from their family and whatever, right? So like meeting the attendee and what you want, not just from a content and experience standpoint, but from just like a personal inconvenience to myself, I thought was really, really well thought out. Second, it is this idea of, hey, we know that we want to give them a network. We know that we want to surround them with people like them that they can forever go ask. And it's one thing to put them all in a room together, but it's another thing to lead them through different types of activities. That one is just kind of like working together to see how people work together. Another one is like, what are you actually struggling with and what are you actually good at? Another one is this idea of like, let's build a framework together. Let's accomplish something that, lives on, that we co-created, that let's have a baby together, right? That we can put out into the world out there. I think those are all short-term, medium-term, long-term relationship building, I guess not relationship building, like frameworks that can happen that really is going to drive that extra value. And to me, that part of it, I think is really good.
Everything that we're doing when we built this agenda. So first, one thing I want to say is we are keeping this event small. We're keeping it private. We're keeping it intimate. We didn't just open up registration for anybody. We've also turned people away. We could have more people than we're getting, but I think the value is in getting the right X amount of people in the room together so they can work together, brain share together, think tank together. And then so if they want to knowledge share, problem solve, think tank, network, peer-to-peer mentor, if those are the things that they're looking for, how do we set up the agenda to enable that? So all of the sessions that we've put forth are basically trying to put them in position to do those things. So it's not like we're not talking about what we want to talk about. We're not talking, right? We're talking about what they want to talk about. We're just creating the structure to allow them to talk about it.
Yeah.
To
And Cody brings
allow,
up a really good point in the chat that
Mhm.
via the podcast and being able to like talk to people about what they care about, and then the behind the scenes of like literally just like elbow grease of reaching out to them, sending them surveys, asking them what they want to talk about. We are doing what you said, right? Like we
Yes,
are sourcing like
it's
what
not
is
our
the relevant
topics.
topic and building around it, not
It's
just
not,
like sitting in a room thinking, man, I think they want to talk about swag, you know?
it's not our topics, it's their
Yeah.
topics, which is
Yeah.
great. But Cody, and I think the other thing is we're taking things that get discussed in the event and dragging them through the rest of the event into other things. So when things are important, when things, right, like it's about them, it's about their topics, about them discussing the things that they want. So I think that to me is important. And then of course, look, we're trying to deliver them an experience. We
Yeah.
want them to want to come back. We want them to be, there's little nuggets about our customers that we know about them as people, as who they are, about their, I don't want to call it their profile because they're all very different humans, but they have a bit of a profile, as do I, as do you. So we're trying to curate that experience for them. And I think if you can hit those nails on the head when you're running your event, that is the meaningful interaction that
Yeah.
everybody is seeking from a face-to-face experience. Can't just get face-to-face and say it was meaningful, right? You have to create it. And I think, look, I don't know if we're right. I don't know if we're wrong, but I mean, definitely gonna try it, and
Yeah.
see what happens and where it goes and what is the feedback and is this worth everybody's time? And our hope is that when people leave our event, they are dying to come back. They're putting it on their calendar next year. I have been to events that when I leave, I pretty much put it's on my calendar next year. It's in
Yep.
my brain. This is where I go every year. I go
Yep.
here at this time and I do this. And when things come up, when someone's like, hey, there's this thing in November, I'm like, whoa, hold on, let me check my schedule because I don't know when this is.
Yep.
That's what
Yep.
we want.
Yeah, true. Two things that I want to bring up real quick before we finish. One is I don't want to put you on the spot for cost, but I think this is important. You are essentially spending less than what you spent on a trade show activation a few
Yep.
years past
Yes.
to put this on, right? Like you want to just kind of like talk through the impact of like how somebody that's listening to this would think about putting this thing on for themselves and rationalizing it.
Yeah, I mean, the way we describe it would be we have exhibited in the past. We know exactly what it costs to exhibit. We know what it costs, everything all together. So for us, it was basically saying, okay, we're not getting the results exhibiting at this particular show that we would want. So we're going to try and do stuff differently. So this is just us moving our budget in a different direction to try to do something similar to what we're trying to do there, right? I mean, of course, at the end of the day, like we are in the business of driving pipeline and driving our brand and awareness. And I think the new formula to doing that as a business in face-to-face events is by giving your customers what they want. And that doesn't mean a good price. And that doesn't mean your features and benefits. And that doesn't mean a demo. It means giving them what do they want from the in-person event. What are they craving? What are they seeking? What are they after? And for us, I feel like we have a better chance at doing that with a limited amount of people in our own private event than we do at set trade show.
Yep. Makes sense. Last but not least, I just think it's worth kind of like there's a handful of spots left. So maybe just talk about who gets invited to this. Maybe we have somebody that's here in the chat that would like to apply to come to this thing. What is the if you are this type of person doing this kinds of things, let's have a conversation. Maybe it's worth it. You come into this event.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, most of the individuals coming to our event are pretty much, I don't love titles, but they're head of global events. They are director of events. It's, senior event marketers, senior event managers, essentially anybody working at a company that is in charge of their trade shows and host events. That's essentially who's coming to this event at this point in time. And we are trying to keep it, we want the room to be as high level as possible because we have very high level people that are attending. So not that I don't want to bring in a beginner, but that's not what this event is for, right? we are looking to bring people in that because they are going to be contributing to each other. If this event was about educating event marketers, we could bring anybody in, but it's not about educating event marketers. It's about each other. It's about them educating each other in a setting and what we've curated because that's what they've asked for.
I think that's a really good distinction. You are not there to educate. You are there to help the room educate each other. And therefore,
I'm
that's
there
why
to help
you need
them knowledge share, think tank, educate, problem solve, create networks, find mentors.
Sounds good, buddy. I think we just hit the hour mark on the spot right there.
I love it. I love sticking to the hour because it's like our promise to people. We're not going to drag into oblivion on your time. So it's, yeah, Pablo, thanks for doing this. Thanks for picking my brain on this. Thanks for your thoughts and being involved. I know you love events, so it's cool. So everybody else for attending, we appreciate it. Thanks for being here. I don't know what the exact schedule is. I probably should know, but it'll be on my LinkedIn. It'll be on the Rockway LinkedIn. You could basically check out what we would consider our summer tour. It shows the dates. It shows the guests. It shows the conversations. July 10th-ish. Thank you so much. So next live show is July 10th. So check out our podcast, Event Marketing Redefined, for all previous episodes, and check me out on LinkedIn and Rockway Exhibits on LinkedIn so you can see the next schedule of live events. Love to have you. Love for you to join. And thanks for everybody who showed up today. We greatly appreciate it.